Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations, and through these discussions, you will learn why the majority of the time, the book wins. Having said that, I am a huge movie buff, and do give unbiased reviews for both the book and the movie, ultimately. So whether you love books, movies, or both, this is the perfect podcast for you. This probably goes without saying, but there will be spoilers for both the book and the movie in this episode. So if you plan on reading the book or watching the movie, go do that first and then come back and listen to this. And now, without further ado, let's get right into it. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Laura, and today I'm here to talk about the book Ghetto Cowboy, written by G. Neary, published in 2011. And then they turned it into a movie titled Concrete Cowboy, and it was directed by Ricky Staub in 2021. So the summary for this book, it's a story of Cole, a 12-year-old in Detroit who is being raised by his mom. He starts getting into too much trouble, and so his mom feels he needs a man in his life. She takes him to Philadelphia to be with his father, a man who had cared more for his horses than for his wife and son. Cole struggles in this new setting with this man he has never even met before, but before long, Cole is taken with the cowboy life, and he and the others fight to keep the horses in stables, which the government is trying to take away. So my thoughts on the book: this is a young adult book, YA. It's aimed towards, like teenagers. Once a child is old enough to read chapter books, though, like they would be able to read this because there's nothing bad in it. There's no cussing or anything, so it's age appropriate for kids once they are able to read a chapter book. But anyway, YA books and coming of age stories are two categories I don't usually go for. Having said that, I really enjoyed this read. And just the fact that it's about black cowboys makes it worth reading, seeing as that's not a subject that is often talked about. And it's a great heartwarming story, and one that is appropriate for kids and adults of all ages. And one review by Elizabeth Bird, who is from the School Library Journal, said of this book, "Maybe part of the reason I like Greg Neary so much is that he sets his stories in cities, talks about gangs and other contemporary issues, and produces stories that no one else is telling, that no one else is even attempting to tell. Because if there's one thing Neary does well, it's tell a tale that needs to be told. Boys and their attachment to horses haven't garnered this much attention since the good old days of the Black Stallion. There's an honesty to Neary's writing that kids are going to respond to. They'll discover a book that speaks to them. Inspiration comes from funny places sometimes. Wherever it comes from, though, it's worth it in the end. Definitely recommend for everybody." And then just some background on black cowboys. So Hollywood Westerns long ago popularized the image of the sharp-shooting, fearless white cowboys of American lore. But these classic films largely exclude the riders of color who helped settle the West, and historians estimate that 1 in every 4 cowboys was black. There are various origin stories of Philadelphia's black cowboys, but the community is believed to date back to the early 20th century, when black Southerners began migrating north for industrial jobs, bringing their livestock with them. Black riders in Philadelphia drove horse-drawn carriages, delivering milk, food, and other goods around the city. Others worked as cowboys passing through, herding cattle, and helping settle the western frontier. Later, they worked as jockeys and horse trainers for professional horse races. When automobiles and trains replaced horses as the primary mode of transportation, black cowboys kept their animals in the city, even attending auctions to save unwanted horses from being killed, a tradition carried on by riders today. And this, saving the horses from the auctions, is shown in the book, I think the movie as well. But yeah, because if nobody buys the horses, then dog food companies would buy them. And so they saved these horses from being killed. But so Ellis Farrell is a guy who runs stables these days, and the stables run by him and black riders before him became a safe haven for many young people. The kids always had stables to come to after school instead of being on the street and getting in trouble, Farrell says. It taught them to have respect and responsibility for the horses, their elders, and themselves. And that was an aspect of the book and movie that I really loved, is just, how these horses provide a safe place for these young kids who aren't always growing up in the best environments, I guess. But with the movie, to start, the movie is much more serious and heavy. Honestly, though, even though the movie is more intense, that doesn't therefore make it the better version of the two. It seemed to lack the heart that the book had. Since the book was aimed toward a younger audience, I wish the movie would have kept up with that theme and made it at least a PG-13 movie, but they decided to make it, like I said, just more intense and more adult, and so it has an R rating because they cuss and, they do drugs, and that's not in the book. So the book is very kid-friendly. Movie, it's not. But anyway, onto the acting. Caleb McLaughlin is the leading role of Cole, and he gives an amazing performance. He's from Stranger Things, I read, but I've never seen Stranger Things. So this is the first thing I've seen him in, but I was very impressed. He has some really emotional scenes throughout this movie, and he gives such a heart-wrenching performance. And in the movie, they also bump Cole's age up from 12 to 15. Idris Elba plays Harp, Cole's cowboy dad, and I think Elba's a great actor, and he's wonderful here. Funny thing is, I think his role in the movie is smaller than the role he'd had in the book. Because Cole, he spends a lot of time away from Harp in the movie, and he's just, getting into trouble with Smush, whereas that wasn't really the case in the book. But speaking of Smush, he is played by Jarrell Jerome in the movie, and Jerome is an excellent actor who you will recognize if you have seen the movie Moonlight. Here he plays Cole's cousin, Smush. This character has a much bigger role in the movie than he'd had in the book. Since Jerome is such a great actor, though, I was happy to see that they made his role bigger, and he also has just some really great scenes, really emotional scenes. And then I, of course, have to mention Method Man, who is the cowboy turned police officer, Leroy. It seems like I have watched, I'm pretty sure I've seen movies with Method Man before, but it's been a while. And I was really impressed with his acting. Leroy is another one who has a bigger role in the movie than he had in the book. But, come on, when you have Method Man, of course you're going to give him a big part. And for those who don't know, by the way, Method Man is a rapper who was part of the Wu-Tang Clan. And he has a lot of solo stuff. But onto the changes. So I will start with Smush. In the book, Cole had never met Smush before. And so when he's dropped off at Harp's place, Smush is like, oh, hey, we're cousins. And Cole had never even met him before. Whereas in the movie, they had met and they talked about how they hadn't seen each other since they were kids. And in both, Smush is just kind of up to no good. However, in the movie, this becomes a bigger focus. He's involved in gangs and drug dealing, and this ultimately leads to his death in the movie, whereas nobody dies in the book. In the movie, Cole got involved and initially had no interest in horses, and he just hung out with Smush. Then as the movie goes on, though, he gets more into the horses, but he still is hanging out with Smush at the same time. Whereas in the book, he just never got involved in the gang activities, and he just, for the most part, just focused on the horses, right from the start, I guess, because that's all there was, really. This is one of those rare cases where the movie actually moves slower than the book, because the book is pretty short. So in the book, it didn't take long at all for him to start enjoying the cowboy life and to look up to Harp. For example, there's a scene where they are racing, they're at the racetrack and Harp is racing. And this happens fairly early in the book, and Cole is just loving it, and he's cheering for Harp, and he's looking up to him. Whereas this scene in the movie, it happens a little later, and Cole, he's not as enthusiastic about it. So in the book, Cole was just quicker to embrace the cowboy life. And in both, he can calm this crazy horse whose name is Boo. So that's the same in both book and movie. But in the book, he actually named the horse Boo, whereas in the movie, the horse was already named Boo to begin with. The movie has a scene where Boo escapes from his stall and only Cole can get close enough to get him back. The book doesn't have this scene, but there is a part where there's this bad rainstorm and Cole kind of saves the day by getting this tarp on the stable roof when others aren't able to. So both of those scenes are kind of him stepping in when no one else was able to, and, where he's the hero in that scene kind of a thing. And speaking of horses, in both, Harper has a horse living with him in his house. In the book, it's his own horse, Lightning, whereas in the movie, he has Smush's old horse, whose name is Chuck, because Smush is no longer riding because he's focusing on other stuff. And then in both, the government is trying to take the land that they're using for the horses, and they come by to take horses that they claim are being malnourished, even though they're all perfectly healthy. In the book, this was a bigger thing and was talked about more, how the government was making them look bad, trying to get the neighboring people on the government side, wanting the stables gone. And so they manipulate the media and they try to make the stables look like a horrible place on the news. And Cole and them, they later fight back by going on the news and sharing the truth about what these stables represent and how they help people and how the horses are being cared for. And by the end of the book, they still have the land, but they're still fighting with the government. Whereas in the movie, at the end, the land is taken. And in real life, the stables really were taken. So that explains why they made that change in the movie. Because the movie was made 10 years after the book. But in the book, Cole and Smush and another friend go to where the police are holding the horses, and they escape with 3 of them. When Harp finds out about this, he is frustrated. Whereas in the movie, Harp is the one that goes with Cole to get the horses back from the police. So that was a big change. And this was after Smush died. They go together to go get Chuck, Smush's horse, as well as Boo. And so this scene, plus when Harp finds Cole after Smush's death, like they're just scenes that really show the bond between them getting stronger. And in the movie, Leroy helps them get away with taking the horses back, but this wasn't the case in the book. And the movie shows Cole's mom drop him off, even though Harp isn't even home. So she just leaves him at nighttime in the city when he's not even home. So that seemed kind of odd. But in the book, Harp was there, and the mom talks with him for a minute before she leaves. So she doesn't just abandon him in the middle of a street. Also in the book, when she is there, when she's driving off, a horse runs in front and she hits a horse and it has to be killed. And so they have this dead horse on their land. And that was left out of the movie. But the book also says that the mom left because Harp, so when Cole was a baby, the book says that mom left because Harp just wasn't ready to take care of a wife and child, and he cared more about his horses. And the movie makes a huge change here. So they say that Harp had been involved in gangs and drug dealing, and he was wanted by the cops for something. And at the time, the mom was pregnant with Cole, and she turns Harp in to the cops. And so while he's in jail, she goes back to Detroit. So that's a huge change, because in the book, she didn't turn him in. He was just too involved in his horses and not ready to be a dad, basically. And at the end of the book, we learn that they now have an arrangement where Cole is with his mom during the school year, and then he's with Harp over the summertime. When she comes back to get him after he's there for those first initial few weeks, this was a really great scene in the book. I really liked it. And his mom is telling him, Cole, I know you know what it feels like to be helpless, even if you don't say it. That's what I was feeling. Helpless. I think of all the times I felt that way. Most of the time, maybe. I thought I was the only one feeling like that, and there she was, feeling the same thing all along. And so this is one of the reasons why this book is great for younger readers, is it helps you learn empathy, and that you aren't the only one going through tough emotions. And kids just tend to be very self-centered. And so I think reading books as a child, it helps you to learn to see other people's perspectives and that there's more going on than just you. And as far as the other cowboys Cole gets to know, none of them are the same from book to movie. They just have all different names and different characters. But I didn't mind this because in the movie, the other cowboys are mostly played by people who are really North Philly cowboys and cowgirls, including Cole's love interest, Isha, who is played by a real cowgirl named Ivana Mercedes. And it's cool that she's an actual cowgirl, but in general, I don't love when movies have to include a romance when there was none in the book. Granted, in the book, Cole was 12, so that's a bit too young for him to have a romance, but yeah, I don't know. I don't love when movies add that. But between the book or movie, ultimately what makes both of these so interesting is that they tell the story of black cowboys in the city. The book takes this and turns it into a heartfelt coming-of-age story that I think kids could really benefit from reading. The movie felt like it should have been moving and emotionally moving, and it almost was at times, but there was just always something holding it back. I don't know. The acting was great, so I think it just comes down to the script and the directing. My favorite part of the movie was actually the end when they show snippets of the real cowboys talking about the horses and what the stables mean to them. So I thought that was great. And it made me realize that this probably would have been better as a documentary. Maybe if they had adapted the book, if they had followed the book closer, maybe I would have liked it more. But yeah, I don't know if there is a documentary about North Philly cowboys, but there should be, because yeah, the interviews at the end were some of the most interesting parts. What's funny is after I watched this movie, I watched the trailer, and I thought the trailer was fantastic. They have a song playing by the Black Pumas, who are an amazing band, and the trailer just takes all of the best parts and makes it look really powerful, because the movie does have a lot of emotional scenes, and the acting is really good. And when you string them all close together in the trailer, I don't know, it's like a great trailer, and it made me cry when I watched it. But I didn't cry while I watched the movie because, I don't know, I think it was just a bit too slow at times, and there was just something lacking there. The book isn't one I would read again anytime too soon, but I am glad that I read it. Once a child is old enough to read chapter books, as I said, this is one I would highly recommend. It covers tough topics like gangs and broken families and racism, but it also teaches empathy, responsibility, having something in life you're passionate about, and the power of family and having a community. So I would have to say that the book wins on this one, though after reading the book, or before reading the book, I do recommend you watch the trailer for the movie because, yeah, the trailer it's intense, but it's a really good trailer. But yeah, I guess that wraps it up for Ghetto Cowboy / Concrete Cowboy. If you guys have read this or seen the movie, I would like to know what your thoughts are on this. And you can join me next week where we are talking about something very different. I will be talking about the famous book written by Hunter S. Thompson, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So stay tuned for that one because that's one that I don't know, when I was younger, I loved that book and movie so much. And so it was interesting coming back and reading it and watching the movie for the first time in like 8 years. And I have a different perspective on it now. So it was pretty interesting. So join me for that one next week. And thanks for listening. And I'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks again for listening. If you want to find me on other platforms, you can check out my Facebook. So facebook.com/whythebookwins. Or my Instagram, which is all one word, whythebookwins. Or you can go to my website, whythebookwins.com. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can reach out to me on any of those. I also have a Buy Me a Coffee account where you can show your support by donating a couple bucks to the podcast. So that's buymeacoffee.com/whythebookwins. But the fact that you are simply listening to the podcast means a lot to me, and I really appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe and follow and tune in next Wednesday for the latest episode of Why the Book Wins.